Hello everybody. Today the lecture will be about paragraphs, and I will divide the lecture into the two following topics. One will be the story arc and the second one will be just about the structure. And to start off, I would like to present you with this paper that you probably all read already. It's available in the Moodle. This is by Weiss and Neumann, 2011, and it's a guide to writing articles in energy science. So not necessarily a topic that we are dealing with, but they give some very good advice on how to write papers. And first of all, they divide the paper into a certain structure. They divide the paper into the microstructure, which is dividing the article into appropriate sections. For example, a section would be your introduction, would be your method, your results, your discussion, similar to a paper or also to your thesis. So these are the big packages. This is called the microstructure. The mesostructure then is defined as the structure of each section of the paper. For example, imagine your introduction. You have this is an entire section by itself, and it's called the mesostructure. And then we go into the even further details. This is called the microstructure. So this is the structure of each paragraph. And today we will go even further down. We will go into the smaller ones, which is the sentence. So basically the paragraph is a series of sentences, and we talk about this as well. And why is this structure so important? Because, as it says here, transparent mesostructure can compensate for poor writing, while no amount of clever writing can compensate for poor mesostructure. So basically what I'm telling you is, if you keep your structure in these sections, then you will have a good start for your thesis or for your paper. So think about it when you write about these sections. Today, specifically, as I told you, we will talk about the mesostructure and the microstructure. So these two highlighted sentences here. To give you some visual idea what these structures are all about. You probably all know these Russian dolls, the ones that you stack into each other. You probably remember this. Like this big one can house basically all of the smaller ones, and they all disappear into each other. So your paper, your master's thesis, imagine this as a big Russian doll where you have lots of sections that fit inside each other, and they make one big entire thing out of it. Basically what you can also do, you have these different dolls and you can shuffle them around. For example, ideally you have some paragraph written or some mesostructure written, and then you can move these around because all of these little dolls or bigger dolls, they are entities. So this gives you this as an idea how to think about your paper or your master's. And this is also a very interesting article. It's called Paper Writing Gone Hollywood. You have it in the Moodle. It is about a scientist who also learned writing at a very later stage. And I must say also for myself, I can talk from my experience, this class has helped me a lot also with the writing. And many of these scientists, I give you examples of this one or also later one, they have started to learn the writing at a later age, basically when they were already science writers. This article shows that this person has also thought about or has been often in the dark how to write papers, how to write theses, often because the storyline wasn't clear to him. He says that writing papers is easiest when you spend considerable thought and time staking all of these pieces first. With pieces, he means these players, the players in an act, in a Hollywood movie. You must answer the three main questions for your Hollywood movie, for your play. And these are, what is the status quo in terms of your research? What is wrong with the status quo, basically what we don't know? And how does this new paper or your master's go beyond this? So if you know these three questions, then you can define your players, like your Hollywood scenes, your movie actors or so on. And you can do this imaginative role-playing basically with your thesis. And this author does it with his students. They go to a whiteboard and they have the story lined up, basically, the main players, the main questions, and so on. And this top-down approach apparently very much helps in identifying the storyline. Yeah, here's some of the highlights again of this paper. So important is, again, that you have these pieces Russian dolls, actors, you have them all together. You have an idea of it. And then if you have this worked out, then the story becomes clear and the writing will become easy. And you have to spend the time and the effort to distill the storyline for you. And yeah, even here, he writes, he compares these Russian dolls on a whiteboard that you can use as an idea how to move these around. Small dolls can also fit into the big dolls, or you can move them and expand them. First of all, now I will talk about the story arc. Then second, we go into details of the story, of the paragraph structure. So the story arc, you all know books, you all have seen movies, Hollywood movies, not movies, but all of this lives because you have an arc in there. And this arc means simply you have an opening, then you build up tension, action movies, a lot of tension, and then in the end you relieve the tension and you have a resolution. This is how our stories are, most of the stories are built up, and you know from yourself, if you don't like the story, then probably the resolution is too late, or you have too much of this here, of this action with no resolution, so something is not right with this. And this is typically, for example, if you have the opening, the tension growing, and you don't have a resolution, like you don't go down again, then you end up in chaos, basically. Or if you have here the opening and you don't get the resolution, like you have a lot of time and time goes on, then it's progression and you will probably be bored and you will put the book aside or you will turn off the television. So we have this building up tension and the relieving tension, and this is very important to understand how the stories work. Because otherwise the reader won't be interested in the story. And this is what we try to do with our masters or with our papers, with our scientific papers. We try to write a story that the reader will be interested in. This is called what's called the story arc. And the story arc of a paper basically can be looked at as many arcs or Russian dolls that fit into each other. So see here the paper. This would be the entire paper, would be one big story arc. Then you have these sections, the meso-sections, which I described before, which could be your introduction, your method, and your results. And note that each one of these sections starts and ends up and starts here again. Like, it's important that you find the resolution here and you start again. Then you have these even smaller arcs. These are the paragraphs. We will talk about these in detail. And even further down, we have the sentences. Each paragraph is combined of sentence. So again, think about your paper, about this concept of story arcs that are connected. All these Russian dolls, big Russian doll, smaller Russian dolls, but they all are connected. The message here is that you have these arcs, and these arcs compartmentalize your thoughts and make them manageable. If you just have this big piece, it becomes not manageable for our understanding. So we break it up in smaller arcs, but the importance is that these arcs are connected. Because what happens if they are not connected? Here, these arcs are completed and linked, so I can follow them. If these are not completed and in multiple places, you can see they are broken up and the story is probably not understood because they are not linked. So it's important that you keep this picture in your head of connected arcs. So basically you make the text, a big text, digestible for the reader. And I will show you now some examples how scientists have improved their writing by just picking up these papers and taking them apart and rewriting them. So to show you an example of this story arc, I show you an example of a published paper. So this is an abstract or a paragraph from a paper. I think it's probably, I'm not sure if it's from Josh Schimel, but it's a published paper. It's from the book of Josh Schimel, which I very much recommend to you. And I'm gonna read you some of these sentences, so it will be a long reading, but I think it's important that you understand what's going on here. So this is about California's and rich fisheries of the coast. I'm going to read some sentences and point out the important words in here. So California supports rich fisheries off its coast. The high productivity of fish is supported by high rates of algae production. Algae growth in the ocean is typically limited by nitrogen supply. Actually, I'm going to highlight now some of the important words in here. This is how we go and dissect a paragraph like this. So I go and highlight the topics here, topic subjects, and you will see some of them here, that allowing deep water, that these winds are driven by regional climate patterns, including El Niño. They're being hit by the greenhouse effect. So I'm highlighting these topical subject sentences that are important. Productivity, maybe California fisheries, ocean circulation patterns, CO2, increasing CO2, just to give you an example. If you take some time to read this, maybe you take the time just to stall your screen and just read it. And then think about it. What do you understand from the story? What is the story about? What is the focus of this paragraph? I will explain now in the next slide, because this paragraph is an example of a published paper, I think also a very high-ranking journal, but overall, it's very hard to understand. So here again, the subject of the sentence is highlighted in red, and you can see from the highlights, California fisheries, fish, algae, again algae, nitrogen, productivity, regional climate, and so on. These are thematically connected, like they are all kind of, they don't exclude another, like I'm not talking about something here completely off topic. However, overall, the whole paragraph is hard to understand. We don't really know where it's going because the story arcs are not connected. I show you one sentence that you can read this one maybe. These winds are driven by regional climate patterns, including El Niño, that are being intensified by the greenhouse effect. Thus, the productivity of California fisheries will likely change as a result of climate warming. So, how is this sentence connected to the previous one? And the problem is, they are not. So, this is arcless writing, an example. There's no obvious direction, incoherent, no internal structure. And this is despite of all the sentences. They are all perfect. They all make sense by itself, but they're not together connected. So sentences are clear, but they don't build off each other. The sentences flow, but they don't flow anywhere in particular. I don't know what the story is. And there's no thematic coherence, no closure back to the opening. Very important. As I showed you before, the arcs have to be connected, but the connection is not there from the beginning to the end. So the broken story arcs basically mean that I don't have the thematic coherence and I get frustrated. For example, is this paragraph about climate change effects in California fisheries, or is it on climate effects on oceans? I simply don't know. So I have another of these examples for you, and this is by Schimel himself. So as I said before, he's an Arctic microbiologist, and he's published great works, and what I really like about him that he's very self-critical. So he goes back to his text, I think this is from one of his papers, and he criticizes or he takes it apart. And this is what also this example comes from. So this is an example from his work in the Arctic also, and it's about soil. So adding compost to soil promotes microbial growth, which then increases microbial production of phosphatase enzymes that release plant-available phosphor from organic matter. The sentences is already very long and very dense. Then the next one, Bromus carinatus, which is a fungi, is a native grass that can be used in re-establishing California grasslands. Its success in phosphorus systems can be stimulated by inoculation with mycorrhizal fungi, and so on. So even though there's lots of words in there that you probably don't know, because who knows what the Bromus carinatus is. The problem with this paragraph is that again also it has a broken story arc. The sentences don't flow into each other, the point of the story is not clear. I read it a couple of times, this paragraph, and I still don't know what it is about. So it's about two approaches to restore degraded grassland, but what is the story? I don't know. And it's also very dense and jumbled. As you can see, like this one sentence was very, very long. It has a lot of words in it that are already very specific, expert words, so it's hard to understand. So also this could be broken up and made simpler using the story arc. And again, so the story arc, the idea that I tried to explain to you is that you have one story, you break it up into little units, think about the Russian dolls or the arcs, and they make all sense because they flow into each other. This way it makes your big chunk of work readable and understandable. Okay, now the next session will be more about the paper structure, and specifically we're talking now about this microstructure. So this is the structure of each paragraph, so the smallest unit of our paper. So there you heard already before from what I tried to say about the story arc. So paragraphs as the smallest unit, the ideas in a paragraph should logically fit together. They should flow from one idea to the next, so they need to be connected. The transitions should be used to formulate these connections, so connect the ideas and concepts. And a well-structured article starts with existing information, ends with new information, and I will talk about that a little bit more soon. So generally, a paragraph, as I said, it's the smallest section of your paper. It's a unit of writing in a larger body of work. A paragraph expresses a particular topic or theme, and a group of sentences in which a single topic or argument is developed. And again, if you think about your paragraph as one entity, one little story, then you can move this. You can take the entire paragraph out or you can move it, which makes it easier for your work. So in general, there's up to 200 to 250 words in 6 sentences that introduces one topic, but that's not a fixed rule. This is, you can think about this in terms of a limited amount of words. Each new paragraph typically begins with a new indentation or line break. This is important. And the purpose of a paragraph is to express a speaker's thought on a particular point in a clear way that is unique and specific to that paragraph. When a new idea is introduced, generally you will introduce a new paragraph. So there's a lot of text again here on this slide. I'm going to go through it anyhow. Again, it takes some of the messages that you should take into account when you write your paper. So the key topic sentence introduces the topic of the paragraph. I will talk about this now soon also in detail again. It presents the main claim or argument of the paragraph. It should be broad enough to allow for explanation, but narrow enough that it does not require a paragraph that is too long, often in the beginning of the paragraph, but doesn't need to be. And then the supporting sentences, support the topic sentence. They explain and elaborate the point of the paragraph. And the concluding sentence, it ends the paragraph and presents to the transition to the next paragraph. So again, you have the structure of one paragraph, and remember you have only like 250 words or so, but this is, you introduce your topic, you support it, and you conclude it. This is the typical structure.